This is Lynn Fraser with the Killoughby Center for Recovery and the Radical Recovery Summit. I'm here today with Lori Brown, the manager of Latwillick Recovery Center in Alkali Lake, British Columbia, Canada.
I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm not originally from Esketemc. I've just been working out here for the last 2 years.
Mhm.
Um, I am First Nation. I am Métis actually,
Mhm.
and so I have a lot of passion for the First Nations and stuff. I bet that's probably where a bit of my passion comes from, is being a little bit active in the First Nation world with the Métis side.
Mhm.
Um, And also, like where Alkali is, it's about like an hour from our town, Williams Lake. So it's like on dirt road. It's very rural area, and I live in between, so it's kind of really convenient for me also. And I love it out here. It's so beautiful and breathtaking, and the whole healing. Like you just drive into they call it the Paradise Valley to
Oh,
here to Alkali, and
yeah.
it's just so healing. You can feel the energy as you come. Yeah,
Ah.
it's
So,
very nice.
what was it that brought you to Alkali Lake in particular? Did you used to live nearby or did you move out of the area?
Well, no, I've always kind of lived nearby. I know a lot of people that are from here, and as well as I have friends that work here as well.
Okay.
Um, and, and like I said, when you're here and visiting, like you tend to not want to leave. It's such a loving, healing environment that you want to be at, and
Mhm.
um, so that's kind of why I first started to apply. And also, I went for schooling for addiction. So
Okay.
when they opened up the center, it was a really good fit for me, I felt. So
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the community.
you bet.
So in the 70s, do you wanna just kind of run through some of the history for people that aren't familiar with it?
For sure. So in the 70s, things were pretty hard around here. Um, as a lot of the members will describe it, it was what they consider like almost like Skid Row here in Alkali. Like there, everybody was drinking, and there wasn't one person that wasn't drinking on this reserve, including children as well.
Right.
Um, So when the movement started to come, which happened to be a father that was coming from Williams Lake that would come out here to try to introduce some AA support group meetings. It started with one person,
Mhm.
and she accepted it, and she decided that she wanted to quit drinking, which is all a part in the film. Like they filmed it all, the history of it. um, it all started that she had her children didn't want to come back home because of her drinking.
Mhm.
So she decided that was enough, and she stopped drinking. And then soon her husband stopped drinking. And later on, they realized is the van that would drive from Williams Lake out to here was just loaded with alcohol.
Oh, uh-huh.
So someone, which was normally a white person, would come out from in town and sell all the alcohol to the people on the reserve.
Okay.
Um, so when Andy, which was one of the first people that became sober here in the community back then, he was elected for chief. He also then stopped the van from coming to the community,
Oh.
which then in other ways he like so before they would get money and they would go to town, and they would buy alcohol and drink and stuff. He also made it so you could only get vouchers at stores to buy your clothing and food and stuff, so they couldn't have that money, so they couldn't go out and reach out. It wouldn't be so easy for somebody to go out and buy alcohol. And then soon other people started to become on board with that.
Mhm.
Um, Actually, the main actor in that show, one of the main actors is Freddie Johnson. Freddie is, if you look in that movie, He was the one that got into a car accident. It shows him climbing up the hill, and one point he also had a fight with his father, and then things got really bad, and they said, Freddie, you need to get help, you need to get treatment and stuff. He is our traditional worker now out of the Latwilik Center.
Hmm.
And that is his true life. That is exactly what happened in his life there. And he was also one of the main people that went out and got treatment and help for the community. Slowly, it all started to grow up to like 90% to almost 100, and then 100% on the community to for being alcohol free and drug free here, dry res.
The dry rice.
Yeah.
Wow, and it cannot have been easy, and it could not have been welcome by many of the people either, because that's a
Yeah.
fast, hard cutoff of a couple of people, and then more, and then not being allowed to buy, not having an easy way to buy liquor.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. There's a couple scenes there in the video where you can see where some of the members go after the chief because he wasn't allowing them to get the alcohol. They also like worked together with the RCMP in Williams Lake and set up the thing because there was a lot of bootlegging out here that was happening. They were sneaking in alcohol, and so the RCMP got on board as well, which was great, and they put a stop to that.
Oh, okay.
But if I recommend anybody to watch that movie, The Honor of All, it is amazing, and they're looking at doing like a follow-up part two. A lot of the people in that movie, some have passed on and some are still with us, but um, it would be neat to show how much the community has grown since then. And now that we have a recovery center here that we offer for people to come out here, it's really kind of a cool piece of history.
It is, right. And that's available on YouTube now as well. So let's back up 150 years or so.
Yeah.
And, British Columbia being on the west coast of Canada or near the west coast, colonization came a little bit later than it did in eastern Canada where I am. The situation was almost 100% alcohol and sexual abuse and violence and all of those problems that come along with that. Do you want to
Mhm.
talk a little bit about how that happened, what the conditions were, residential schools, and all of those things to kind of bring people to the point where they see, oh, okay, I see how that
Yeah, you
situation.
bet. Um, Residential school, there's a lot to talk about that. Um, and being here, I've learned a lot, and I've been told a lot of stories and stuff from a lot of people. And Um, almost every fall, a cattle truck would come out here. So a big, like a Freightliner truck with nothing in it, just a cattle truck, and they would come and take all their kids from 5 years old or 4 years old and up. So then they would ride in the back of that cattle truck, and this was fall, and our weather out here is cold. Like it was not a pleasant ride to go to the mission, is what they called it, the residential school. Um, so then there was, they were like, I know a couple people that were in the residential school and their parents passed away, and they were told, and they were only allowed to have 1 hour to grieve for their family, or some were not even told until they were able to come back home. The residential school has a huge effect on trauma and within the families growing generational trauma as well. And still a huge effect to this day. Quite often you hear a lot of people saying, well, that happened a long time ago. What does it have to do with right now? No, it is very present and it is very right now. There's a lot of people that I work with, and most of the people that I work with that come to this facility are children from somebody that has gone to a residential school.
Right.
Or there's a lot of like gaps where people are just starting to learn a little bit more because the elders are talking about it and wanting to share a little bit more about it. But, like what they experienced, the first day arriving there and just being like stripped with everything being doused with line powder all over them, their hair being cut, not allowed to speak their language. I know some of them that had to sit on, like, kneel on stones for hours because they weren't able to speak, because they didn't know English.
Right.
Yeah, I know I've heard stories and people are sharing as well that, they were whipped, they're taken out to the trees, and they were the big, thick leather harnesses across their back until they were bleeding, until they passed out. Um,
Wow.
a lot of sexual, abuse in the residential school for the younger girls and males as well. I don't know if you've heard, Alkali did a healing circle with one of the priests that used to work at a residential school years ago.
Oh, wow.
Um, he was actually charged and convicted, and
Yeah.
when I first learned about this, I didn't understand, well, why would they want to bring him back here and have a
Mhm.
healing circle with them? But it wasn't
Right.
about that. It was about some of his victims that they came to him in his when he was sitting there and said, "I want to give you back the pain that you created to me. What you
Wow.
did to me, I'm putting back on you." And so it was actually a really good healing for a lot of the victims that were there. But I think a lot of people don't understand when they say what a healing circle
Right.
kind of would look like. It wasn't for him, it was for the people to heal.
So
Um,
let's
yeah.
pause here for a moment though, and just kind of for people to take that in. So 4, 5, 6-year-old kids and older, but that age. So if anybody has a grandchild, a child, can you imagine? I mean, it's just horrifying to think of what happened.
Well, yeah,
And it went on for years.
if you really think about, like, yeah, your grandchildren or a 4 or 5-year-old or someone, a young child that is starting preschool, day school, that's only there for half a day.
Right.
How hard it is for that child to transition into that. Um,
Mhm.
where a lot of these were put in the cattle truck and sent there. Once you arrived, you get totally stripped of all your clothes, everything, and put into a uniform where everybody looks the same. You get numbers.
Mm.
You were numbered, so you
Right.
no longer had a name. And you were put in a facility that, the way I've been told is the place had like over 30 beds for one floor for like all the young girls
Mhm.
because the boys and females couldn't stay together in the same place.
Right.
And so they had to, um, listen to everybody cry and miss their parents every night when they're going to sleep. And imagine a 4-year-old or 5-year-old going that and not understanding, like,
No.
nowadays it's so normal for a child to, sleep with their parents and all that stuff to get that comforting. And I couldn't imagine being
Yeah.
that little child.
Well, and
Um,
the the purpose was to take the Indian out of the child. That's what the government, that's their stated purpose, was they were
that's
trying
right.
to take the culture away and turn them into English speaking white kids.
Yes. Yeah. So I heard a lot of people being told that they weren't worthy. They're just a stupid Indian. Sorry to say it that way, but that's how they would express it. Um, and that they were dirty, and some were told to always like try to scrub the color off of your skin, kind of thing, to try to fit in a bit more. Some
Yeah.
pretty horrible stuff for a child to try to understand.
Yeah. And away from their family, different food, different everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that really kind of strikes me too is what was that like for the parents and grandparents and uncles and aunties who were left behind?
Yes. Yeah. So I've heard a lot of different feedback regarding around that. Um, Sometimes some of the parents would try to run and hide with their children to go up in the field, trying to not allow them to be found,
Right.
um, which, if they got caught, they would be either fined or punished themselves or the children taken away from them.
Right.
In some that felt that they hadn't to, like, they had no choice, basically lost themselves too in that moment when they had to walk away from their children.
Right.
And a lot of them never recovered from that. A lot of them turned to alcohol and or suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was very traumatic.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of rest on that for a minute so that people could get a sense of what sets up the conditions where 100% of the people, including children in a community, are drinking, and
Mm.
the connection there with the trauma of the people who are in the schools, the people who couldn't prevent their children from being stolen from them, and that a lot of people might look at the conditions on the Indian reservations, they call them, and look at that and go, well, there's something wrong with those people. Like you said, they call them stupid Indians. And I grew up
Mhm.
in North Battleford, Saskatchewan, which is now an urban reserve, actually. And there was a real segregation between white people and Indigenous people, and a lot of that kind of prejudice that you're talking about. That was definitely the attitude.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, there's still a lot of that for sure here. And it's really sad, but it
Mhm.
is the way it is. But I also feel like there's a lot of no, not understanding of going on, because I think a lot of people, like I said, feel like, oh, that happened a long time ago. It wasn't a part, and they don't realize that it is affecting, because when you look at the scenario of, okay, so a child went to residential school and they were in their school for 13 years, then they come back and they got to go back home to try to relive on their
Yeah.
reserve, not knowing what to do because they've lost everything that they knew what to do for. And so now they're put in a total different environment where they got to try to relearn something again in a
Mhm.
different manner, and then not have any parents, because a lot of them did lose their parents while they were in there. So when I know lots of people that came out of residential school that were 16, 17 years old and were on their own and wound up having to try to raise other children or their siblings and all that stuff, and without any parenting support themselves, not even knowing how to take care of somebody.
Right, and the cultural traditions, which would include parenting, had been taken from them, so they were raised in boarding schools
Yes.
where not only they weren't in a family, they didn't have their language, but there was so much abuse
Hmm.
in schools, yeah. So we have this, situation in the community with so much suffering and trauma, and a couple of people stopped drinking and then a few more. So one of the things that I was looking in your on your treatment center is about the healing circles, and you mentioned one a little while ago too. So the Indigenous approach to recovery from alcohol and trauma is a little bit different. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like at your treatment center, and what are some of the principles that you use there for working in recovery?
Our sharing circle, like every morning, we start off with our sharing circle, and we also do traditional smudging and blessing everybody before we start off on the circle.
Mhm.
Um, what really I see that alcohol really has to offer people is they they come from the heart and they speak from the heart, and sometimes it can be really heavy,
Mhm.
but sometimes that's what people need, and they need to speak and get that stuff off their chest. And also, like, there's no judgment. So, people will say, like, some of the and I'll speak it for Freddie because Freddie is one of them, but Freddie will say, at one point in my life, I was laying on the street drinking away. I was there with you and the way you are now, and we're here to help you. Don't feel that you're being judged or anything. We are the same. And so I think a lot of that understanding is a huge thing that alkali has to offer.
Right.
Yeah,
So the shame of the addiction and where people are at
yeah.
is met by this, yeah, we're all here together. And would that be
That
something most people participate in at the treatment center then? Is the AA meetings?
we do have in-house AA meetings as well, and like the traditional 12 steps and stuff like that. Um, Ken Johnson, which is the guy that has been running it for I think like close to 40 years here in Alkali. He doesn't like to call it the AA meeting. He likes to call it a support group meeting. And
Okay.
that is one of the biggest things that feedback that I hear from people is that, you know, there's no beating around the bush here. We're diving right in to work with you,
Yeah.
um and he will say, it's like 18 inches is the biggest journey of your life from your mind to your heart. So we need to work
Mm.
with your heart. And um, so it's really powerful that way.
We know that when people have been sexually abused, oftentimes they will go on to abuse others sexually, and the
Yeah.
same with other kinds of abuse.
Yeah.
So part of the healing circle and part of the pain of I can't be in my heart because I can't acknowledge that.
Mhm.
How has that worked with in the support groups and at your center? It seems to me like there's a different approach than you might find elsewhere.
For sure. So that's a lot to explain, but let's start at the kind of the first bit of the question that you asked regarding um, sexual abuse. Freddie actually breaks it down pretty good. Um, for many years, yeah, I've heard people say it in a blunt way that um, they take the priest to bed with them still at night as an adult.
Right.
And so, how do you stop that? Um, Freddie says, it does become to realize it's about forgiveness and realizing and understanding that that priest or that person who sexually abused you learned that behavior from somebody else. So it
Yeah.
becomes to be a passed down behavior.
Mm.
Quite often, we don't understand that, if as a child doesn't know any difference, but if a mom is holding a child and sees a spider and screams and freaks out, that child will instantly start to feel that tension and the stuff too. So
Right.
she's learning that child is learning that behavior like mom is saying this is scary, right? So I need to be worried too. And it's simply passed on kind of just like that
Mhm.
along the ways. Um so what the sharing circles and stuff really have to offer is also the forgiveness and learning to heal and being saying, okay, what this person did to me is not my fault. And it's
Mhm.
not my pain that he put on me. I need to put that pain back to him
Right.
to be able to come to a point where you come to an understanding of like, I don't want to pack this anymore.
Mhm.
This wasn't mine. This is his or hers.
Right.
So that takes a long time though. That's not something easy to do right away. Like you got to really work at that for a long time. And um, but it all goes around to learning the education and stuff around it too. Like meaning um, understanding that behaviors are passed on and understanding the reasonings behind it, or um, it's hard to even a person that becomes an abuser as well that to understand why am I doing this, not realizing that's the way they only way they know how to show love or affection to somebody, whether it's physical abuse or mental abuse. They don't know any different.
Right. Right.
And so, and then it gets kind of passed on. So there's that saying where they're hoping like in 7 generations that things are going to start to change. I
Mhm.
truthfully think that it might be a little longer than that, um,
Right.
because it's not just about the past, it is also still happening now. And like
Mhm.
as we were talking about people feeling there's still a boundary in between First Nations and white people, and people try to say there's not. But for an
Mhm.
example, um, this is just something that's always kind of really bothered me. The schooling in William in town goes to grade 12, but out on the reserve generally only go to like grade 7 in most of them. So when it comes time for them to become in high school, then they got to transition to go to town. And so then there's a huge another transition because you got to keep in mind that they are only used to going to a school that has maybe 40 to 60 people in it. And then they got to be thrown into a school that is a way different school with hundreds of kids and try to fit in. And then there's behaviors that come out of that. And then yeah, it's kind of like an ongoing thing, and that's still present to this day. So, I don't know how you would ever fix that, but I think it's an issue still.
And would they be bussed in every day, or is that residential as well?
No, so a lot of times, like out here, the buses will only come to Alkaline, but there's like two other reserves past us that are like half an hour or more long. The buses won't even go to them.
Mm.
So for somebody that to live out there on the which is called Dog Creek Reserve or Canoe, or I mean, yeah, they would all not be allowed to go to school because they don't have the resources. And in order to have the resources, then they would have to move their whole family. And this is the kicker, they would have to move their whole family to go live into Williams Lake. But if
Mhm.
they move off of the reserve land, they're
Oh,
not entitled to have any support or help.
right.
So it's like a big vicious circle that keeps going around and is still very present to this day. So there's still
Right.
a lot of gaps in the way that I think it's going to affect people. Is I'm trying to explain that right, but
Mm, mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's still really present. Yeah. And the technology exists now for remote learning for sure. And a lot of kids are doing that with COVID-19 as well.
and
But the
see, but
technology isn't
yeah,
available.
well, that's the thing. We live in an area that does not have
Right.
cell service. They're just starting to get
Mhm.
internet. Some of these houses out there still don't even have power to them. Like it's a very
I love that.
prominent thing. Just it's still happening where a lot of people don't see that, right?
Right. Mm. And then if you move to the city or to the town, then that creates all of its own cultural things as
It's a
well. Then you're living in a white city and yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge culture shock. You don't. It's a total way a different way of learning. So generally, yeah, it's very hard. I mean, you picture yourself moving from where you live to somewhere out on the land that had nothing for you, and you had to learn to survive by yourself. Like it's a huge difference. Where
Mhm,
living in
mhm.
town is, it can be hard. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So and not all the not everyone wants to do that either. Yeah. So what is life like, in your community now for most people? Like, I know there's been a lot of business development and different things. What is it like there now?
It's pretty amazing actually. They have created a lot of their own employment here on the reserve. They have the beautiful buildings that they just recently put up in the last couple of years. So a brand new school building,
Mhm.
a brand new band office building, and our building here at the center as well. There is their own forestry. They do their own forestry. They're pretty self independent. So the
Mhm.
other thing that about Alkali is I want to say in a roundabout way, like almost self-governant. Like they're not that way, but they are running their own reserve. Where some of the reserves that are close by, they have like a facility, a main area that kind of oversees everything, like their health programs and all that stuff, right? Where Alkali provides all of that right here, which
Oh,
is pretty good. Yeah.
yeah, right. And and then so it's more of a First Nations self-governant governing
Yeah,
model.
I don't want to say it that like it that for sure, but it's kind of around in that same term.
So intergenerational trauma. Just from your website, what was really clear is that there's a good understanding of how intergenerational trauma works, and that there's a real family focus of we need to be working with everybody, not just the person who is a victim of abuse, but we need to be working with everybody.
Hmm.
So that doesn't seem like it's really common in white recovery centers. It seems like there's still a lot of, well, you're the person with the problem. You're the person who's the alcoholic. You're the person who's done wrong. You have to figure it out. And even
Yeah.
when people go back to their families, it's like, well, I'm not going to stop drinking during dinner. You're going to have to figure that out. So is that a different kind of a feeling there, kind of an approach there? What would you say about that?
So I agree with you a lot. A lot of trauma, I mean treatment centers and stuff. They're there to kind of deal with just the scuff of the problem, I guess you want to say.
Okay.
Where we try to focus to the root of the problem. What is the addiction and what is happening to cause you this? And we need to work on what that problem is.
Ah, okay.
Um, a lot of times too, treatment centers, like, they they do their 6 to 8 weeks or whatever that might look like for that person, and then they walk out the doors closed behind them,
Right.
and it's you fall back into the same ruts. You really haven't learned a new life. You might have looked at what was happening,
Right.
but the key is to also learn what the new life is. So
Yeah.
now that you're clean and you're at home and you're sitting there all by yourself and realize that you might not have as many friends because they don't want to hang around with you anymore, all those other problems. So what are we going to do now? So how do we relive your new life? Those are some of the things that we look at building life skills,
Mhm.
whether it's crafts or a lot of what we've had a lot of success is the culture.
Mhm.
Learning how to, okay, today I'm going to go out and have a sweat or go out and be with the land and everything like that. Trying to learn new life, new ways of living. Yeah.
So the elders are very much involved in the treatment center.
Oh yes, Freddie is our huge key person here as well. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And we have also a lot of other elders in the community itself. Besides COVID right now, has kind of put a lock on things, but generally, it is. You know how that saying, um, "It takes a village to raise a child."
Right.
Alkali is the exact same way when it comes to the clients that are coming to the center.
Yeah.
So they're greeted right away by other people in the community. They are loved and supported. There would be like activities in the community before COVID, and
Mhm.
they would, always have the clients come down there. And that's a huge thing in healing as well, because a lot of
Okay.
times people need a belonging and they need to feel that they are loved and they're belonged.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's you don't get that, or if you go to a center and you feel uncomfortable, you're not going to share, you're not going to talk. You need to feel this is your home, and that's what we
Mhm.
tell everybody that comes here. This is your home, so
Mhm.
we got to make it as comfortable as possible for you to be here. Yeah.
Right. So is this only for Indigenous people, or are there white people come to the center as well?
No, it's white people come as well.
Okay.
um So it's kind of neat because we've had some white clients
Mhm.
first, and they do the First Nation culture with everybody, and they adapt to it and they love it, and they say, there's something I just feel. The last client was like, I just feel totally different. Like everything's kind of aligned with my spirituality and my mental health and
Mm,
everything. And I think it's an important tool that generally, like, we
mhm.
generally forget about, that we need to have our medicine wheel in check, and it doesn't matter who we are, because if you
Exactly,
don't have that in check, you're not going to run smoothly, right? So
exactly,
uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, so when you're thinking about, the people that are coming in, and then do they go home after 6 or 8 weeks, or what's the usual stay at the center?
So we recommend minimum of 2 months
Mhm.
to 6 months.
Okay.
And the people that are still, that I have left, I'm still very much in contact in our life, and I reach out to them every day. I still support them. If they need help with anything, I'm there. Like
Okay.
um, how did the other day we explained it to someone, like it's like a seed that we put in the ground, and we cherish, and we watch it grow and then expand, and we put all that love into our clients.
Mhm.
um, I'm not gonna just we're not just gonna say no. That's it, bye, you're done. No, we want to have them also back in the community. The chief is very welcoming. That he always says, you're welcome here at any time. Come back.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
they build the family network is basically, another way of looking at it.
right, right. When we look at the statistics of, suicide amongst young people and drug and alcohol use amongst young people, and in particular Indigenous people, it's really horrible that how many people die by suicide who are Indigenous. Is that the same, similar for Alkali Lake, or is it quite different in your community?
Um, I want to say it's like between drug and alcohol and suicide, I want to say it's like probably 50-50. Like
Okay.
here, there is some suicidal here, but a
Mhm.
lot of it is more overdose in drugs here. If
Okay,
anybody passes from that, yeah.
right. And so the so I guess this gets back to what you were saying about the intergenerational trauma takes generations to work through. So
Yes.
even though the whole community is working together on this, it's still really difficult. How many people live in your community?
I think there is um 400 and something in total that live out here.
Okay.
And that's spread out through, like, we have our main res, and then we have the outside res as well, like out in the meadows and stuff.
Mhm.
And I back before, there was thousands. They
Right,
just about was completely wiped out because of the smallpox.
right. It's difficult to imagine, the change in the culture to go from thousands of people living in a traditional way to the kind of culture shock and the going through the residential schools, and so
Mhm.
it's quite a journey to even imagine how people could heal from that kind of
Yeah,
trauma.
and with in between all of that too, the alkali here, when the Indian Act first put them out on this reserve land, they also brought in water that was put in a tub that was up on the mountainside, that was like a big steel basing, and it actually started to poison them, and it killed a lot of people as well within a first year. And so Freddie could share and talk a little bit more about that as well to discuss it. So there's been a lot of trauma and loss in this community, where been a lot of gaps of, parenting and learning and all that stuff that is needed.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
right. So when you think about, the community now and the treatment center which is just looks like such a wonderful place, and the working right in the heart of healing. Do you feel optimistic towards the future for your community and for the people in it?
Oh, I have no doubt in my mind that, Alkali will always be successful and known for their healing, and it will continue to be a historical piece, I believe. And possibly in the future, more things will come out of that, and
Mhm.
um, Alkali has a lot to offer. So,
Right. Right.
yeah,
It's wonderful to see them that there was that movie made of it, documentary, and now you're talking about doing an update, which would be nice before, some of the older people, while they're still here and they can share their story.
for sure. And it's really nice too because they're talking about like so in the movie The Honor All, like and there's a couple scenes where there was little ones in there at the very end where like pretending to be playing an AA meeting or something like that. They were playing that. And so now those little ones they're looking at focusing at them and talking to them about like what it was like for them to grow up
Mm,
and stuff in the out here. So I think it will be really neat, and I'm really looking forward to
yeah,
seeing that get done. Um,
yeah. There's so much acknowledgement now that of intergenerational trauma for one, but also that our culture, our white culture is pretty broken. And with all
yes,
the isolation and disconnection and then the trauma and the disconnection from trauma, that
yeah,
something has to change. So I can really see why people who come to the center and they're met in the heart and welcomed into the community. What a deep healing experience that would be.
for sure. That is our goal, and like one of our goals re- regarding the center. Like I didn't want to create a program where everybody has to fit it. I want to make it so that it fits around to that individual's needs, whatever that looks like.
Right.
Being that we're operation with open not just First Nation people, with white people as well, then they're welcome to come.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a co-ed facility, so you really got to be kind of open to what your day might look like. I might have a total plan to come in and be like, hey, we're going to do this today, and walk in and be like, okay, so we're not doing this today, we're doing this today, right? So you have to be very flexible and
Right.
open to understanding what people's needs are. In a lot of treatment centers, you go in there, it's very structural. You get up at 6, you do this, you do that, and all the way down to the very last minute.
Right.
And that's it. But which is great because it does help learn and train your brain how to kind of think your habits.
Mhm.
However, when you walk out that door, then what?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's really kind of neat, and I do think recovery centers is a very misstep in a lot of people's healing journeys.
Mhm.
I've been blessed the fact that I get to work here and I get to work with like Freddie and everyone and learn the spirituality part of it and seeing how important that is in people's recovery as well.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, we have to find some way to come in and do that deep healing. Otherwise, what drives the addiction is still gonna be there.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
totally. And I like Dr. Gabor Maté talks about similar things just like this,
Mhm.
and understanding what the root of the addiction, or what is your pain, what is going on,
Yeah.
um, that needs to be addressed.
Mhm. The environment that you've created there is one where it's not a shaming environment. It's very much this is kinda how we got here, and we're gonna heal as a community of people who are together in this, not one person's up here, the other one's down there.
That's
But
right.
how can we actually recover together from the shame and from the trauma? And it's the connection that
Hmm.
helps us to heal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And I'm sure it doesn't hurt being out in the beautiful mountains and, all of where you are.
uh
Yeah. Yeah.
there's something also about the healing and being out on the land and with mother nature itself. um
Mhm.
I think that is a lost thing as well, and if you go back to our ancestries, all of us back many, many years
Yeah.
ago, that's how we lived life, and we stopped to smell the roses. But now, we
Yeah.
don't. And we tend to then create so much stress and trauma and fog in ourselves that we don't get to stop to process that and deal with it.
Hmm.
And so those are part of the learning tools and skills that we like to try to offer,
As
that,
well.
yeah.
Right. So how is it for you with COVID? Is there much COVID in your area?
Thankfully, no, we haven't. And the reserve is always, we've had no cases out here. There
Yeah.
has been, I think, one or two in Williams Lake, which is an hour away.
Mhm.
Um, the reserve is, again, we're very like protective, like a family.
Yeah.
So when it first started in March, there was a 2-week lockdown,
Mhm.
where no one was allowed to come out of their houses. They all stayed in their own yard, in their own houses, and
Mm.
um, health staff would give food and stuff that was needed.
Oh, okay.
Um, and also, like even currently, right now, there is a checkpoint at the end of the reserve, asking, why are you? What's your visit? What are you doing? Where are you going? And all that other stuff too. Just keeping a protection on everybody that is here. So,
Oh, that's good. Yeah, in an isolated community, it's a little bit easier. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Some of the clients when that first started, it creates a lot of stress and stuff, but learning that we are probably at one of the most safest places. I'm not going to knock on wood, but it's a pretty safe area being in a rural area.
Yeah,
um, it grows, it brings confidence in yourself too, right? And thank you so much for doing this too, and spreading the word about our facility. And
yeah. Thanks for coming on to talk about it. It's
yeah,
really
no,
good with the whole summit, I really try to get a wide range of people and what they're doing and how they're healing, and not just the traditional. I mean, some of the traditional recovery centers are great, and
yeah,
so some people have that too, but there's so many other ways to work with trauma and
yeah,
intergenerational
absolutely.
trauma and shame and community and connection. And so oftentimes it's the smaller ones, or people who have a different kind of an approach that's really helpful. Welcome to the 2021 Radical Recovery Summit, presented by the Kilby Center for Recovery. This is Lynn Fraser, your moderator. This year, our theme is Feel It, Heal It, a new paradigm of recovery, featuring a diverse group of thought leaders and innovators, people who are working on the ground in the new field of addiction recovery. Go to radicalrecoverysummit.com to sign up and watch free.